The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Laredo, Texas, and Faith Kensington pressed herself against the weathered wooden wall of the general store, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. It was August 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small border town that sat along the Rio Grande. Faith had been in Laredo for 3 weeks now, working at the Lucky Star Saloon to pay her way after fleeing San Antonio, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the burning shame of what had been done to her. She was 20 years old, and she had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury women like her could not afford. The man who had brought her to this state of desperation was named Marcus Thornby, a wealthy merchant who had promised her marriage and respectability. Instead, he had used her affections to gain access to her late father's land deeds, forged her signature, and sold everything she owned before disappearing into the night. When Faith had gone to the law, they had looked at her with barely concealed contempt, suggesting she had been complicit in the scheme. A young woman alone, claiming a man had wronged her, was not worth their time or effort. So she had run, taking what little money she had sewn into the hem of her skirt, and had ended up here in this dusty town where the Rio Grande separated Texas from Mexico, and where people asked fewer questions than they might have elsewhere. The gunshot that had sent her scurrying for cover had come from the Silver Dollar gambling house across the street. Now she could hear angry voices, the crash of furniture, and then the sound of boots hitting the wooden boardwalk. Faith peered around the corner and saw a tall man striding out of the gambling house, his black hat pulled low over his eyes, a gun still smoking in his right hand. He was broad-shouldered and lean, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had faced down danger more times than he could count. His duster coat swung around his legs as he walked, and even from this distance, Faith could see the hard set of his jaw. He holstered his weapon with practiced ease and turned, facing the gambling house as 3 men stumbled out after him. "You cheated," one of them yelled, his face red with rage and whiskey. The tall man's voice carried across the street, calm and steady. "I won fair and square. You are drunk and a poor loser. Go home before you get yourself killed." "Nobody talks to me like that," the drunk man snarled, reaching for his gun. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. The tall man's hand moved in a blur, his pistol clearing leather faster than Faith could track. The shot rang out, and the drunk man's gun went flying from his hand, blood blooming on his fingers where the bullet had grazed them. "Next one goes through your heart," the tall man said, his voice carrying that same deadly calm. "I've got no quarrel with you, but I will not be shot in the street like a dog. Go home." The 3 men backed away, the injured one clutching his hand and cursing, but they did not draw again. They disappeared back into the gambling house, and the street fell silent once more. Faith found herself stepping out from her hiding place, drawn by something she could not quite name. The tall man had turned and was walking down the street when he noticed her. He stopped, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other across the dusty expanse. Then he changed direction, walking toward her with those long, purposeful strides. As he got closer, Faith could see his face more clearly. He was young, probably no more than 25, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran along his left cheekbone, pale against his tan, and his dark hair curled slightly at the edges where it touched his collar. "You should not be standing out here, miss," he said when he reached her. His voice was deeper than she had expected, with a slight drawl that spoke of years spent under the Texas sun. "Those men might come back angry and stupid." "I work at the Lucky Star," Faith said, finding her voice. "I was on my way there when the shooting started." His gray eyes studied her face, and she had the strangest sensation that he was seeing past the careful facade she had constructed, past the respectable dress and the pinned-up hair, straight through to the wounded, frightened woman underneath. "Then let me walk you there," he said, offering his arm. "A woman alone in this town is asking for trouble." Faith hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust him, not to trust any man. But there was something in his eyes, something steady and honest, that made her place her hand on his arm. They walked in silence for a moment, their boots making soft sounds on the boardwalk. Faith was acutely aware of the strength in the arm beneath her fingers, the way he positioned himself between her and the street, as if shielding her from potential danger. "My name is Austin Sawyer," he said as they walked. "I am a ranch hand mostly, though I have done a bit of everything. Just rode into town this morning looking for work." "Faith Kensington," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "That is a fine name," Austin said. "Suits you somehow." They reached the Lucky Star Saloon, and Faith reluctantly withdrew her hand from his arm. The building was one of the nicer establishments in Laredo, with painted shutters and a sign that had been recently repainted. Inside, she could hear the tinny sound of a piano and the rumble of male voices. "Thank you for walking me," Faith said, looking up at him. Austin touched the brim of his hat. "It was my pleasure, Miss Kensington. Perhaps I will see you again." "Perhaps," Faith said, though something in her chest tightened at the thought of him walking away. She watched him go, his tall figure moving down the street until he turned a corner and disappeared from view. Then she squared her shoulders and went inside to face another evening of serving drinks and dodging unwanted advances. The Lucky Star was owned by a woman named Rosie Gutierrez, a former dance hall girl who had saved her money and bought the place when the previous owner drank himself to death. Rosie was hard but fair, and she ran a respectable establishment as such things went. There was no tolerance for rough treatment of her girls, and any man who could not keep his hands to himself found himself banned for life. "You are late," Rosie said when Faith came through the back door. She was a handsome woman in her early 40s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. "There was shooting in the street," Faith explained, tying on her apron. "I had to wait for it to be safe." Rosie nodded, accepting this explanation. Shootings were common enough in Laredo, situated as it was on the border where smugglers, outlaws, and desperate men of all kinds passed through like water through a sieve. The evening passed in the usual blur of activity. Faith served drinks, smiled at the customers, and turned down 3 proposals of the indecent variety with practiced politeness. The piano player, an old man named Chester who had lost 3 fingers in a mining accident, played the same dozen songs over and over. Gamblers clustered around the tables, and the air grew thick with cigar smoke and the smell of whiskey. It was near midnight when the doors swung open and Austin Sawyer walked in. Faith felt her pulse quicken as she watched him survey the room. He had cleaned up since the afternoon, though he still wore the same dark clothes and the same gun belt riding low on his hips. His eyes found her almost immediately, and something in her stomach fluttered like a trapped bird. He made his way to the bar and ordered a whiskey, then turned to lean against the polished wood, watching her as she moved through the room with her tray of drinks. Faith tried to focus on her work, but she found herself acutely aware of his gaze following her. When she finally had a moment to breathe, she approached the bar. "Did you find work?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "I did," Austin said. "Got hired on at the Lazy M Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I will be breaking horses mostly. Good pay, decent boss." He paused, then added, "I wanted to see you again before I headed out there tomorrow." Faith felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Why?" Austin set down his whiskey glass and looked at her directly. Because I have been drifting for 3 years now, working ranch to ranch, town to town, and I have never met anyone who made me want to stop and stay. Until today. The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Faith felt something crack in her chest, some carefully constructed wall beginning to crumble. "You do not know me," she said quietly. "I know enough," Austin replied. "I know you have been hurt. I can see it in your eyes. I know you are scared to trust anyone. But I also know that when you looked at me today, you saw something worth taking a chance on, even if you do not want to admit it yet." Faith glanced around the saloon, but no one was paying them any attention. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I have been used," she said, the words bitter on her tongue. "A man I trusted took everything from me, my home, my inheritance, my good name. I came here with nothing, and I am trying to build something from these ruins. I cannot afford to be foolish again." Austin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. "You have been waiting for me," he said simply. "You just did not know it yet. I am not that man who hurt you. I am not any man who would use a woman so cruelly. Give me a chance to prove it." Faith wanted to pull her hand away. She wanted to laugh in his face and tell him he was crazy. But instead, she found herself holding on, feeling the solid strength of him like an anchor in a storm. "I do not know how," she whispered. "We will figure it out together," Austin said. "I will be riding out to the Lazy M tomorrow, but I will come back to town every Sunday. Will you walk with me? Just walk and talk, nothing more until you are ready. Let me court you properly, Faith Kensington." She should say no. Every bit of hard-won wisdom told her to protect herself, to keep her heart locked away where it could not be broken again. But when she looked into Austin Sawyer's storm-gray eyes, she saw something that made her want to take the risk. "All right," she said finally. "Sunday." The smile that spread across Austin's face was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her breath catch. "Sunday," he repeated. "I will be here." He finished his whiskey, paid his tab, and left. Faith watched him go, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched her skin. Rosie appeared at her elbow. "That one is different," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I have seen a lot of men come through here, Faith. Most of them are users and takers. That one has honest eyes." "How can you tell?" Faith asked. "Experience," Rosie said. "And instinct. Do not shut him out because of what one bad man did to you. The world has good men in it too, though they are rarer than they should be." Faith nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She went back to work, but the rest of the night passed in a blur. Her mind kept returning to Austin Sawyer, to the feel of his arm under her hand, to the calm certainty in his voice when he had said she had been waiting for him. She hardly knew him. It was madness to even consider trusting him. But something deep inside her, some part that had been sleeping since Marcus Thornby had betrayed her, was beginning to wake up again. The week that followed was the longest of Faith's life. She worked at the Lucky Star, saved her wages, and tried not to think about Sunday. But he was there in her thoughts when she woke in the morning and when she lay down to sleep at night. She found herself wondering what he was doing, whether the horse breaking was going well, whether he was thinking of her too. Sunday finally arrived bright and hot, with the August sun turning the streets of Laredo into rivers of dust. Faith put on her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had survived her flight from San Antonio. She pinned her dark blonde hair up carefully and allowed herself a small luxury, a dab of rose water on her wrists. Rosie had given her the day off without being asked. "Go," she had said with a knowing smile. "Enjoy yourself. Lord knows you deserve some happiness." Faith walked to the town square where they had agreed to meet. Her hands were shaking slightly and she clasped them together to still them. What if he did not come? What if he had changed his mind? What if this was all some elaborate, cruel joke? But then she saw him, standing by the old cottonwood tree that provided the only real shade in the square. He had cleaned up, wearing a white shirt and dark trousers, his hat in his hands. When he saw her, his face lit up with that same sunrise smile. "Miss Kensington," he said, bowing slightly. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," Faith said, feeling shy suddenly. "You look very nice yourself." They began to walk, moving slowly down the dusty streets toward the edge of town where the buildings gave way to scrubland, and the river glinted in the distance. For a while, neither of them spoke, content to simply be in each other's presence. "Tell me about yourself," Austin said finally. "Where are you from? What brought you to Laredo?" Faith hesitated, then decided on honesty. If he was going to court her, he deserved to know the truth. "I am from San Antonio originally. My father owned a small ranch, nothing grand, but it was ours. He died 2 years ago and I was alone. I thought I was managing well enough, but then I met Marcus Thornby." She told him the whole sorry story, the courtship, the promises, the betrayal. Austin listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke. "The law would not help me," Faith said, her voice tight with old anger. "They said I should have known better than to trust a man I was not married to. They suggested I had been complicit in selling the land, so I took what little money I had hidden away and I left. I could not stay there seeing pity or contempt in everyone's eyes." "That was not your fault," Austin said fiercely. "None of it. That man was a thief and a scoundrel and the law should have helped you." "But they did not," Faith said simply. "So I am here, working at a saloon, trying to save enough money to maybe start over somewhere else someday." They had reached the riverbank now, where cottonwoods grew thick, and the sound of the water provided a peaceful backdrop. Austin gestured to a fallen log and they sat down together, looking out at the slow-moving Rio Grande. "My story is less dramatic," Austin said. "I grew up in East Texas, on a farm. My parents died of fever when I was 16. I have a sister, Sarah, who married a good man and lives in Houston now. We write letters sometimes. After our parents died, I worked on neighboring farms for a few years, but I felt restless. I wanted to see more of Texas to make my own way. So I started drifting, working ranches, learning everything I could about horses and cattle and surviving in this hard country." "Why did you stop drifting?" Faith asked. Austin turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "Because I saw you standing outside that general store and something in me said, this is it. This is what you have been looking for. I know it sounds crazy. I know we just met, but I have learned to trust my instincts, Faith. They have kept me alive this long." Faith felt tears prick her eyes. "I want to trust you," she whispered, "but I am so afraid." "I know," Austin said gently, "and I will not rush you. We will take this as slow as you need. But I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I want to court you properly. I want to earn your trust. And someday, if you will have me, I want to marry you and give you the life you deserve." The tears spilled over then, running down Faith's cheeks. Austin reached out and wiped them away with his thumb, his touch unbearably gentle. "I have never had anyone speak to me the way you do," Faith said. "Like I matter, like I am worth something." "You are worth everything," Austin said. "Do not ever doubt that." They sat by the river until the sun began to sink toward the horizon, talking about everything and nothing. Austin told her about the horses he was breaking at the Lazy M, about the ranch owner's wife who made the best biscuits he had ever tasted. Faith told him about Rosie and the other girls at the Lucky Star, about the strange collection of humanity that passed through the saloon doors. When he finally walked her back to the boarding house where she rented a small room, he took her hand and held it for a long moment. "Next Sunday?" he asked. "Next Sunday," Faith agreed. He kissed her hand again, that same courtly gesture, and then he was gone, riding back toward the Lazy M on his sturdy bay horse. Faith went inside feeling lighter than she had in months. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for her after all. The Sundays became the center of Faith's world. Every week, Austin would ride into town and they would spend the day together. Sometimes they walked by the river. Sometimes they attended the small church on the edge of town, sitting side by side on the hard wooden pews. Sometimes they just sat in the shade and talked, sharing their dreams and fears. Austin was patient, never pushing for more than Faith was ready to give. He held her hand, but he did not try to kiss her. He spoke of the future, but he did not demand promises she was not ready to make. Slowly, week by week, Faith felt the walls around her heart beginning to crumble. It was on their 5th Sunday together, in late September when the brutal heat of summer was finally beginning to ease, that Austin asked her about her dreams. They were sitting by the river again, watching the water flow past. Faith had grown comfortable enough with him now to relax, to let her guard down in a way she never had with anyone else. "What do you want, Faith?" Austin asked. "If you could have anything in the world, what would it be?" Faith thought about it for a long moment. "I want a home," she said finally. "Not just a house, but a real home. A place that is mine, that no one can take away from me. I want to feel safe. I want to wake up in the morning without being afraid of what the day will bring." "What else?" Austin prompted gently. Faith felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she continued. "I want a family. Children. I want to give them the kind of childhood I had before my mother died, full of love and laughter and security. I want to build something lasting, something that matters." "Those are good dreams," Austin said, "important ones." "What about you?" Faith asked. "What do you want?" Austin was quiet for a moment, looking out at the river. "I want to stop running," he said. "I want to put down roots somewhere. I want a ranch of my own, not a huge spread, just enough land to raise good horses and maybe some cattle. I want a woman by my side who I can trust completely, who trusts me the same way. I want children too, a whole house full of them if God is willing. I want to build something that will last, that I can pass down to my children and their children after them." He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made Faith's heart skip. "I want all of that with you, Faith. I have wanted it since the day I met you. I am willing to wait as long as it takes for you to be ready, but I want you to know where my heart is." Faith felt something break loose inside her, the last stubborn remnant of her fear. "I think I am falling in love with you," she whispered. Austin reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his calloused palms warm against her skin. "I know I am falling in love with you," he said. "In fact, I think I started falling the moment I saw you." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Faith did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, with an intensity that surprised her. When his lips finally met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. The kiss was everything Faith had hoped for and nothing like what Marcus Thornby had taken from her. This was given freely, shared equally, a beginning rather than an ending. When they finally pulled apart, Faith was breathless. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now. "I do not know when it happened, but I do. I love you, Austin Sawyer." "I love you too, Faith Kensington," Austin said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I swear to you I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me." They sat together as the sun set, Austin's arm around Faith's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and for the first time since her world had fallen apart, she felt truly safe. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. Austin continued working at the Lazy M, and Faith kept her position at the Lucky Star, but they spent every possible moment together. The other ranch hands teased Austin good-naturedly about being love-struck, and Rosie smiled knowingly whenever Faith came to work with a dreamy expression. In November, Austin asked Faith to marry him. He did it properly, getting down on one knee in front of Rosie's saloon with half the town watching. "Faith Kensington," he said, his voice carrying clear and strong, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I do not have much to offer you yet, but I promise I will work every day of my life to give you the home and the family you deserve. I will love you and protect you and stand by you through whatever comes. Will you marry me?" Faith did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Austin stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while the watching crowd cheered and whistled. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly, not caring who was watching. They were married 2 weeks later in the little church on the edge of town. Faith wore a simple white dress that Rosie and the other girls from the Lucky Star had helped her sew. Austin wore his best clothes, his dark hair slicked back, his gray eyes shining with happiness. The ceremony was brief, conducted by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Laredo, but it was perfect. Rosie gave Faith away, standing in for the father she had lost. Several of the ranch hands from the Lazy M attended, along with most of the regular customers from the Lucky Star. It was a strange mix of people, but they were all there because they cared about Faith and Austin and wanted to see them happy. When the preacher said Austin could kiss his bride, he did so with an enthusiasm that made the congregation laugh and cheer. Faith felt joy bubble up inside her, pure and effervescent. She was married. She had a husband who loved her, who had proven his devotion over months of patient courtship. She was no longer alone. The owner of the Lazy M, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Tom Morrison, had given Austin a small cabin on the ranch property as a wedding gift. It was not much, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was sturdy and weatherproof, and it was theirs. Faith cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the generosity. "We will not be here forever," Austin promised her as they stood on the porch that first night as husband and wife. "I am saving my wages, and I am learning everything I can about horse breeding. In a few years, I will have enough to buy us our own land, but for now this is home." "It is perfect," Faith said, and she meant it. The cabin might be small, but it was filled with love. That was all that mattered. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Money was tight, and they had to be careful with every penny. The work was hard, with Austin putting in long days at the ranch and Faith continuing to work at the Lucky Star until she could afford to stop. There were times when they were both so tired they could barely speak, when the dream of their own ranch seemed impossibly far away. But they had each other, and that made all the difference. At night, they would lie in their small bed and talk about the future, about the ranch they would build and the children they would have. Austin would hold Faith close and tell her stories about the horses he was training, and Faith would share gossip from the saloon and plans for how she would decorate their future home. In the spring of 1879, Faith discovered she was pregnant. She told Austin on a Sunday afternoon as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Austin went very still. Then he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to Laredo. He picked Faith up and spun her around, just as he had on the day she had agreed to marry him. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I am going to be a father." "Are you happy?" Faith asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Austin said. He set her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "I am going to take such good care of you, both of you, I promise." And he did. Austin was attentive and protective, insisting that Faith stop working at the Lucky Star as soon as she began to show. Rosie grumbled good-naturedly about losing her best waitress, but gave Faith a generous bonus when she left. The pregnancy was easier than Faith had feared. She felt tired and sick in the early months, but Austin was there to hold her hair back and bring her cool water. As her belly grew round, he would sit with her in the evenings and talk to the baby, telling stories and making promises about all the things they would do together. In December of 1879, Faith gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Austin Sawyer, after the ranch owner who had given them their start and the father who had loved them both so well. Thomas had his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination, making his presence known from the moment he entered the world with a lusty cry. Austin held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are amazing." "Thank you for this gift, Faith." Faith, exhausted but happy, smiled up at her husband. "We made him together," she said. "He is ours." The first years of Thomas's life were busy and full. Austin continued working at the Lazy M, but he was also saving every penny he could toward buying their own land. Faith discovered she had a talent for sewing and began taking in mending and making clothes for the ranch families, adding her earnings to their savings. Thomas grew into a lively, curious toddler who followed his father everywhere when Austin was home. Austin was a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching Thomas about horses and the land even though the boy was far too young to understand. In the summer of 1881, their second child was born, a daughter they named Grace. She was smaller than Thomas had been, with wispy blonde hair and blue eyes that eventually darkened to match her mother's. If Thomas was all energy and movement, Grace was contemplative and calm, content to sit and observe the world around her. "We are blessed," Faith said one evening as she nursed Grace while Austin played with Thomas on the floor. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "We are just getting started," Austin said with a grin. "We have our children, we have each other, and soon we will have our own place. I can feel it, Faith. Our dream is getting closer." He was right. In the fall of 1882, Austin heard about a property for sale about 15 miles north of Laredo. It was not a large spread, just 300 acres, but it had good water, decent grazing, and a small house that needed work but was structurally sound. The owner was an old man whose children had moved east, and he wanted to sell quickly. Austin and Faith rode out to see it, leaving the children with Rosie for the day. The moment Faith saw the property, she knew it was meant to be theirs. The land rolled gently toward a creek, and there were cottonwoods providing shade around the house. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the blue sky. "This is it," she said to Austin. "This is where we are supposed to be." Austin negotiated with the owner, and after some back and forth, they agreed on a price. It took almost everything they had saved, but they became the proud owners of 300 acres of Texas land. They called it the Double S Ranch for Sawyer and set about making it their own. The first year was the hardest. They moved into the house, which was even more rundown than they had realized. The roof leaked, the floors were warped, and animals had been nesting in some of the rooms. But Austin and Faith threw themselves into the work with determination. They patched the roof and replaced damaged floorboards. They whitewashed the walls and repaired the broken windows. Faith planted a garden and Austin built a proper barn and corrals. Slowly, the place began to look less like a derelict property and more like a home. Austin bought their first horses, using his knowledge from years of working at the Lazy M to select animals with good bloodlines and sound temperament. His plan was to breed and train horses, developing a reputation for quality that would attract buyers from across Texas. Money was tighter than ever, and there were times when Faith worried they had taken on too much, but Austin never wavered in his confidence. "We are building something that will last," he would tell her. "It will not happen overnight, but it will happen." He was right. By their second year on the Double S, Austin had trained and sold several horses at good prices. Word began to spread about the quality of his work, and buyers started seeking him out. Faith's garden flourished, providing food for their table and surplus to sell in Laredo. They were not rich by any means, but they were making it work. In the spring of 1884, Faith gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Samuel. He was the biggest of their babies, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. Thomas, now 4, took his role as big brother seriously, while 2-year-old Grace seemed bemused by the new addition to the family. "Our family is growing," Austin said as he held baby Samuel, Thomas and Grace crowding close to see their new brother. "Our ranch is growing. Everything is coming together just like we planned." Faith looked at her husband and children, at the home they had built together, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about the frightened, broken woman she had been when she first arrived in Laredo, and she could hardly recognize herself. Austin had been right when he said she had been waiting for him. He had given her everything she had lost and so much more. The years passed in a rhythm of hard work and simple joys. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Austin and Faith's love deepened into something rich and enduring. They had their struggles, of course. There were droughts that withered the grass and made water scarce. There were years when buyers were few and money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries and all the normal trials of life. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. Austin never stopped being the man who had walked Faith home that first day, protective and gentle and utterly devoted. Faith never stopped being grateful for the second chance she had been given, the opportunity to build something beautiful from the ruins of her past. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. By the time he was 10, he was already helping Austin with the training, showing a natural gift for understanding the animals. Grace was quieter but no less capable, with a talent for numbers that made her invaluable when it came to managing the ranch accounts. Samuel was the wild one, always getting into trouble, always pushing boundaries, but with a huge heart and an infectious laugh. In 1887, Faith gave birth to their fourth child, a daughter they named Hope. She was born during a thunderstorm, arriving so quickly that Austin barely had time to fetch the midwife. Hope was tiny and fierce, with a will of iron from the moment she drew her first breath. "4 children," Austin said wonderingly, holding newborn Hope while Faith rested. "We have 4 beautiful children and a ranch that is thriving. How did I get so lucky?" "We got lucky," Faith corrected gently. "We found each other when we both needed it most." The Double S Ranch became known throughout the region for the quality of its horses. Austin's reputation grew, and buyers came from as far away as San Antonio and El Paso to purchase animals he had trained. The family was not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough to meet their needs and a little extra to save for the future. Faith had long since forgiven Marcus Thornby for what he had done to her. She realized that his betrayal, as painful as it had led her to Laredo and to Austin. If things had happened differently, she might never have known this life, this love. She would not change a single thing. In 1890, when Thomas was 11 and Hope was 3, something unexpected happened. A lawyer from San Antonio arrived at the ranch one sunny afternoon, looking uncomfortable in his city clothes and clearly unused to riding. "Mrs. Sawyer?" he asked when Faith answered the door. "Mrs. Faith Sawyer, formerly Faith Kensington." "Yes," Faith said cautiously, old wariness rising up. "What is this about?" "My name is Harold Peters," the lawyer said. "I represent the estate of Marcus Thornby. May I come in?" Faith felt her heart begin to pound. She had not heard that name in over a decade, and she had no desire to hear it now. But curiosity won out over caution, and she invited the lawyer inside. Austin was in the barn, but she called for him, wanting him present for whatever this was about. He came quickly, wiping his hands on his trousers, his eyes going hard when he saw the lawyer. "What is going on?" Austin asked, moving to stand beside Faith. Harold Peters cleared his throat. "Marcus Thornby died 3 months ago," he said. "He was killed in a riverboat accident in New Orleans. I have been tracking down various people mentioned in his papers, and your name came up, Mrs. Sawyer." "Why?" Faith asked bluntly. "Because Thornby kept records of all his schemes," Peters said, looking uncomfortable. "He documented everything, including what he did to you. In his papers there was a letter addressed to you. May I read it?" Faith glanced at Austin, who nodded. "Go ahead," she said. Peters pulled out a much-folded piece of paper and began to read. "Miss Kensington, if you are hearing this, it means I am dead. I doubt you will mourn me. You should not. I was a terrible man who did terrible things, and you were just one of many people I hurt in my quest for money and power. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness, because I do not deserve it, but I am writing to make what amends I can. I sold your father's land for $8,000. That money, with interest, now amounts to $12,000. I am instructing my lawyer to find you and give you this money. It will not undo what I did, but it is rightfully yours. I hope you have found a better life than the one I left you with. Marcus Thornby." Faith sat down hard, her legs suddenly unable to support her. $12,000. It was a fortune, more money than she had ever dreamed of having. "Is this real?" Austin asked, his voice tight. "Completely real," Peters said. He pulled out a bank draft and handed it to Faith. "This is yours, Mrs. Sawyer. I am sorry for what was done to you. I wish justice could have been served while Thornby was alive to face it." After Peters left, Faith and Austin sat at their kitchen table and stared at the bank draft. $12,000. It was enough to expand the ranch, to buy more land, to hire help. It was enough to ensure their children had opportunities they might never have had otherwise. "What do you want to do with it?" Austin asked quietly. Faith thought about it for a long moment. Then she smiled. "I want to use some of it to expand the ranch," she said. "Buy more land, more horses, build a better barn, and maybe add on to the house. The children are getting older and they need more space." "And the rest?" Austin prompted. "I want to put the rest away for the children," Faith said. "For their educations, their futures. Thomas will probably stay here and run the ranch with you, but Grace and Samuel and Hope might want to do other things. I want them to have choices." Austin reached across the table and took her hand. "You are an amazing woman, Faith Sawyer. After everything Thornby put you through, you are not bitter. You are thinking about the future, about our children." "I learned from the best," Faith said, squeezing his hand. "You taught me that the past does not define us. What we build, what we create, that is what matters. This money is just a tool to help us build an even better future." They used the money wisely. Austin purchased an adjoining 300 acres, doubling the size of the ranch. They built a new barn, large enough to house twice as many horses, with a proper training area. They added 2 rooms to the house, giving the children more space and creating a real office where Faith could manage the ranch accounts. They also hired help. A young couple named Jim and Sarah Collins, who were struggling to make ends meet. Jim became Austin's right hand, learning the horse training business and proving to have a real gift for it. Sarah helped Faith with the house and the children, and the two women became close friends. The Double S Ranch flourished. Austin's reputation as a horse trainer grew to the point where he had buyers waiting months for animals. Thomas, now in his teens, was developing into a fine horseman in his own right. Grace showed an interest in teaching and talked about becoming a school teacher someday. Samuel was still wild, but in the best way, full of energy and ideas. Hope, the baby, was growing into a strong-willed little girl who wrapped her father around her finger. In 1895, Faith gave birth to their fifth and final child, a boy they named Daniel. He was a surprise, coming along when Faith was nearly 40 and had thought her childbearing years were over. But he was healthy and happy, and the whole family doted on him. 5 children, Austin said, holding baby Daniel while their other children crowded around to see their new brother. "We have been truly blessed, Faith." "We have," Faith agreed, looking at her family with tears in her eyes. "More than I ever dreamed possible." As the years rolled on, the Sawyer family became a fixture in the Laredo community. They were known for their honesty, their hard work, and their generosity. When neighbors fell on hard times, Austin and Faith were always there to help. When the town needed volunteers for church projects or school events, the Sawyers showed up. They gave back to the community that had given Faith a second chance all those years ago. Thomas married at 22, bringing home a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch. They had their first child, a boy they named Austin after his grandfather, within the year. Grace did become a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch property that served the children of the area. Samuel, true to his wild nature, joined the Texas Rangers for a few years before coming home to help run the ranch. Hope grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's determination and her father's steady nature. Daniel, the youngest, showed signs of being the smartest of all the children, with a hunger for learning that eventually led him to talk about attending university in Austin or perhaps even back east. Austin and Faith grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. Austin's hair turned gray at the temples, and lines appeared around his eyes, but Faith thought he had never been more handsome. Faith's blonde hair silvered, and her hands grew rough from years of hard work, but Austin told her she was more beautiful than the day he first saw her. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, and talk about the life they had built together. Austin would hold Faith's hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on her skin, and they would count their blessings. "Do you remember the day we met?" Austin asked one evening. It was 1905, and they had been married for 26 years. Their children were grown or growing, and the ranch was more successful than they had ever imagined. "Every detail," Faith said. "You walked out of that gambling house with smoke still coming from your gun, and I thought you were the most dangerous man I had ever seen." Austin laughed. "And now I know you are the safest man I have ever known," Faith said. "You gave me back my life, Austin. You taught me to trust again, to love again. You gave me all of this." She gestured at the ranch, at the house they had built together, at the sounds of their grandchildren playing in the yard. "I did not give you anything you did not earn yourself," Austin said. "You took a chance on me when you had every reason not to. You worked just as hard as I did to build this place. You raised our children to be good people. I am the one who should be grateful, Faith." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sun sank below the horizon. In the distance, they could hear Thomas calling to his children, telling them it was time to come inside for supper. Grace was lighting lamps in the schoolhouse, preparing for evening lessons. Samuel was in the barn, tending to the horses. Hope was in the kitchen with her mother's old friend Sarah, learning to make bread. Daniel was probably in the house somewhere, reading by lamplight. "I would not change a single thing," Faith said softly. "Not the pain I went through before, not the struggles we faced. All of it led us here, to this moment, to this life. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Austin raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, just as he had that first night at the Lucky Star Saloon so many years ago. "You have been the greatest adventure of my life, Faith Sawyer. Every single day with you has been a gift. And every day with you has been proof that there are still good men in this world," Faith said. "That love is real, that dreams can come true, that broken things can be mended." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Austin and Faith sat together on the porch of the home they had built with their own hands. They had come so far from that August day in 1878, when a frightened young woman and a drifting cowboy had met in the dusty streets of Laredo. They had built a life, a family, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and new challenges. Austin and Faith celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1909, surrounded by their children and a growing number of grandchildren. The Double S Ranch had expanded to over 1,000 acres and was known throughout Texas as one of the premier horse breeding operations in the state. When Austin turned 55 in 1908, he began to slow down a bit, letting Thomas and Samuel take on more of the day-to-day running of the ranch. He spent more time with Faith, and they took long rides across their property, remembering all the years they had poured into making it successful. Faith, at 52, remained active and engaged, helping Grace with the school and doting on her grandchildren. She kept meticulous records of the ranch finances and maintained correspondence with buyers and suppliers. She also wrote long letters to Austin's sister Sarah in Houston, keeping her updated on the doings of the family. In the winter of 1912, Austin caught pneumonia. Faith nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she brought to everything in her life. For 2 weeks, she barely left his side, spooning broth into him, bathing his fevered brow, praying with an intensity that surprised even her. Austin recovered, but it took months for him to regain his full strength. During his convalescence, he and Faith had many long conversations about the future. "I want to make sure everything is in order," Austin said one afternoon. "Thomas will inherit the ranch, but I want to make sure the other children are provided for too." "They are all doing well," Faith reminded him. "Grace has her teaching. Samuel has his share of the ranch work. Hope married that nice young man from the bank, and Daniel is at university. We have done right by all of them." "Because of you," Austin said. "You made sure every penny was accounted for, every decision was the right one. This ranch would not exist without your partnership, Faith." "We built it together," Faith said firmly. "Everything we have, we created side by side. That is how it has always been, and that is how it will always be." Austin reached for her hand. "When I am gone," he began. "Stop," Faith said sharply. "You are not going anywhere. We have too much left to do." "I am not planning on going anywhere soon," Austin said with a gentle smile. "But when the time comes, whenever that is, I want you to know how grateful I am for every moment we have had together. You saved my life just as much as I saved yours, Faith. Before I met you, I was drifting with no purpose, no direction. You gave me a reason to stop, to build, to dream. You gave me everything." Faith felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You gave me back my faith in people," she said. "You showed me that love could be real and lasting, that some men actually keep their promises. You gave me a family, a home, a life full of meaning. I would have been nothing without you. You would have been something wonderful, Austin corrected, but I am glad we got to be wonderful together. Austin made a full recovery and was back to his usual self by spring. The family celebrated with a large gathering, with all 5 children and their families descending on the ranch for a week of reunion and rejoicing. The house was full of noise and laughter, and the patter of small feet as grandchildren raced through the rooms. On the last evening of the gathering, as the sun was setting and the family was assembled on the expanded porch, Thomas stood up to make a speech. "I want to thank Ma and Pa," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered family. "They started with nothing and built all of this. They taught us the value of hard work, of integrity, of standing by your word. They showed us what real love looks like, the kind that endures through hard times and good times alike. Everything we are, everything we have, we owe to them." The family raised their glasses in a toast, and Austin and Faith looked at each other with tears in their eyes. This was their legacy, not just the land or the horses or the money in the bank, but these people, this family, bound together by love and shared values. "We did good," Austin whispered to Faith. "We did better than good," Faith whispered back. "We did everything we set out to do and more." The years that followed were gentler, with Austin and Faith settling into the role of patriarch and matriarch of their growing clan. They spent their days in quiet contentment, working in the garden, riding across their land, playing with their grandchildren, and enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. In 1918, the world was gripped by the Great War in Europe and the influenza pandemic that followed. The Sawyer family, isolated as they were on the ranch, largely escaped the worst of it, though Samuel's wife fell ill and recovered after a frightening few weeks. Austin and Faith watched the changing world with interest, but also with gratitude that they had built their life when and where they did. The wild west of their youth was gone, replaced by automobiles and telephones and a new century full of promise and peril. "The world keeps changing," Austin observed one evening in 1920. He was 67 now, his hair completely white, his hands gnarled from decades of hard work. "But what we built here, that does not change. The values we passed on to our children, the love we share, that is eternal." Faith, at 62, had aged gracefully, her hair silver but her eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. "I used to think I had to keep moving, keep running from my past," she said. "But you showed me that putting down roots, building something permanent, that is the real adventure, and what an adventure it has been." In the fall of 1922, Austin and Faith celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary. All 5 of their children were there, along with their spouses and children. There were now 15 grandchildren, ranging in age from infant to young adult, and the house was bursting at the seams with family. Grace had brought her students from the school to perform a special recital in honor of their grandparents. Hope's husband had brought his camera and took photographs to commemorate the occasion. Samuel had organized a demonstration of horsemanship skills, showing off the latest crop of horses trained using the methods Austin had pioneered. Thomas gave a moving speech about the legacy of integrity and love his parents had built. Daniel, now a lawyer practicing in Austin, read a proclamation he had written honoring his parents' contributions to the community. As Faith looked around at all the faces she loved, at the home they had built, and the life they had created, she felt a sense of completion. Everything she had lost so long ago had been returned to her 100-fold. The young woman who had stood in the streets of Laredo, broken and afraid, seemed like someone from another lifetime. "What are you thinking about?" Austin asked, coming to stand beside her. "I am thinking about how right you were," Faith said. That day when I told you I had been used and you told me I had been waiting for you, you were absolutely right. I just did not know it yet." Austin put his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "We were both waiting," he said. "I was waiting for someone who would make all the wandering worthwhile. I was waiting for a reason to stop running and start building. I was waiting for you." They stood together, watching their family celebrate around them, and knew that they had achieved everything they had set out to achieve. They had built a life of meaning and purpose. They had raised children who were good people, who would carry on their values and pass them down to future generations. They had turned 300 acres of rough Texas land into a thriving ranch. Most importantly, they had loved each other faithfully and well for over 4 decades. Austin lived to be 73, passing peacefully in his sleep in 1926 with Faith beside him. His death was mourned throughout the region, as he had been respected and admired by all who knew him. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched over the years. Faith lived another 8 years, dying quietly in 1934 at the age of 76. She had spent her widowhood maintaining the ranch with the help of her children, writing her memoirs for her grandchildren, and continuing to be a pillar of the community. In her final years, she often spoke of Austin and the life they had built together, always with a smile on her face and love in her voice. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the Double S Ranch, under a cottonwood tree that Austin had planted when they first arrived. Their graves were marked with simple stones that read, "Austin Sawyer, beloved husband and father, 1853–1926, and Faith Sawyer, beloved wife and mother, 1858–1934. But beneath those inscriptions, at the request of their children, were added the words, "Together they built a legacy of love." The Double S Ranch continued under the management of Thomas and his children, and eventually his grandchildren. The methods Austin pioneered in horse training were passed down through generations, and the ranch's reputation for quality never diminished. The school that Grace started continued to operate, educating children from ranches throughout the region. The family values of integrity, hard work, and devotion that Austin and Faith had instilled in their children continued to guide the family for generations. The story of Austin and Faith became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren would ask to hear about how their ancestors met, about the cowboy who saw a frightened young woman and knew she was his destiny, about the woman who had been betrayed and broken but found the courage to love again. In the family Bible, passed down through the generations, Faith had written an entry on the day of her marriage to Austin. It read, "Today I married Austin Sawyer, the man who gave me back my life. I was lost and he found me. I was broken and he helped me heal. I had been used and he showed me what real love looks like. Today begins the greatest adventure of my life." And at the bottom of that entry in Austin's distinctive handwriting were the words, "And she was worth waiting for. Every single day with her is a gift. I will love her until my last breath and beyond." Their love story, born in the dusty streets of a border town in the dying days of the Old West, had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. It had weathered hardship and celebrated triumph. It had produced children and grandchildren who carried forward the values they had cherished. It had transformed 2 wounded souls into a partnership that had built something lasting and meaningful. Years after both Austin and Faith were gone, their great-granddaughter found a leather-bound journal in the attic of the ranch house. It was Faith's diary from those early years in Laredo, and in it, she had recorded her first impressions of the man who would become her husband. "Today I met a man named Austin Sawyer," one entry read. He has storm gray eyes and a way of looking at me that makes me feel seen for the first time in months. I am afraid to trust him. I am afraid to trust anyone, but there is something about him that makes me want to try. He says I have been waiting for him. Maybe he is right. Maybe after all the darkness there can still be light, and there had been light, brilliant and warm and lasting. The story of Austin and Faith Sawyer was not just a tale of two people who fell in love. It was a testament to the power of second chances, to the possibility of healing, to the enduring nature of real love. It was proof that even in the hardest times, in the roughest places, two people could find each other and build something beautiful. The Double S Ranch still stands today, still operated by descendants of Austin and Faith Sawyer. The house has been expanded and modernized, but the original cabin still stands, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. Visitors can see the cottonwood tree where Austin and Faith used to sit and dream about the future, the barn where Austin trained his horses, the schoolhouse where Grace taught generations of children. But more than the physical structures, what endures is the story itself. It is a reminder that love can heal the deepest wounds, that trust can be rebuilt, that broken dreams can give way to even better ones. It is a testament to the courage it takes to love again after being hurt, to the wisdom of patience, to the power of partnership. Austin Sawyer saw a young woman who had been used and betrayed, and he recognized her as his destiny. Faith Kensington saw a cowboy with honest eyes, and she found the courage to take one more chance. Together, they built a life that exceeded both their dreams, a love that endured beyond death, a legacy that continues to inspire generations. Their story began with pain and loss but ended with joy and abundance. It started in uncertainty and fear but grew into confidence and peace. And though they are long gone, their love lives on in every descendant who values integrity, in every couple who chooses to work together through hard times, in every person who believes that real love is worth fighting for. Faith had been used, that was true. But more importantly, she had been loved truly and deeply and permanently. And that love had transformed everything, turning ashes into beauty, sorrow into joy, despair into hope. That was the real magic of their story, the reason it continued to be told long after the Wild West had faded into history. Austin had been right when he told Faith she had been waiting for him. But he might not have realized that he had been waiting for her too, waiting for the woman who would give his life meaning and purpose, who would partner with him in building something that would last long after they were gone. Together, they had written a love story for the ages, one that began with a chance meeting in Laredo, Texas in 1878 and continued to echo through the generations that followed. It was a story of redemption and second chances, of courage and trust, of love that conquered fear and healed old wounds. It was, in the end, exactly what both of them had been waiting for all along, even when they did not know it yet.